Picture this, just for a moment. A machine of bronze gears, smaller than a shoebox, quietly turning to show the moon crossing the sky, the sun moving through the seasons, and 5 wandering points of light we now call planets, all moving exactly as the real sky moves above you tonight. It wasn't built last century, not 2 centuries ago. It was built more than 2,000 years ago, by hands whose names we still don't know. Before this story ends, we'll watch that machine come back to life. But it begins, like so many old secrets do, at the bottom of the sea. In the spring of 1901, sponge divers from the Greek island of Symi took shelter from a storm near the tiny island of Antikythera, between Crete and the mainland. While they waited, one diver went down to look at the seabed and found not sponges, but an ancient shipwreck, resting exactly where it had sunk more than 2,000 years before. Their captain, Dimitrios Kontos, reported it at once, and a full excavation followed with the Hellenic Royal Navy. What came up was almost too rich to believe. Bronze statues, among them a graceful young athlete called the Ephebae of Antikythera, nearly 3 dozen marble sculptures, including life-size horses, jewelry, glassware, coins. Historians estimate the ship itself carried some 300 tons of luxury cargo, likely bound from the Greek world toward Roman buyers. And almost as an afterthought, divers also brought up a few unglamorous lumps of corroded bronze, easy to overlook next to golden jewelry and marble horses. For a while, almost nobody did look closely. It took another year and one curious pair of eyes before that changed. In 1902, a Greek politician named Spyridon Stais noticed something in one of those lumps that had no business being there. A gear, precise and interlocking, sealed inside stone-hard bronze. His cousin Valerios Stais, the museum's director, confirmed it. That lump of green stone wasn't debris. It held machinery. Nobody in 1902 could explain gears that precise inside something 2,000 years old, gears Europe itself wouldn't build again for another 1,000 years. It would take most of the next century, and tools nobody back then could have imagined, to read what was locked inside. By 1905 and 1906, German scholar Albert Rehm studied the faint inscriptions still visible, references to the Sun, to Venus, and argued this was some kind of astronomical calculator. But corrosion sealed most of it away. You could see a little from outside, not inside. It took until the 1950s and 60s for British historian Derek de Solla Price to try X-rays. Working with physicist Charalampos Karakalos in 1971, his imaging showed the mechanism once held dials on both its front and back, inside a wooden case. He published his findings in 1974 in Gears from the Greeks. His gear count wasn't quite right, but his method became the template every later researcher would follow. In 1990, a further imaging project revealed dozens more corroded gear wheels nobody had seen before. Piece by piece, the machine was emerging from its own rust. Then, in 2005, a UK-Greek team, the Antikythera Mechanism research project, led by Professor Mike Edmonds and mathematician Tony Freeth, gained something Price never had: a purpose-built X-ray CT scanner powerful enough to see gear teeth through solid bronze, and imaging that could read inscriptions 2,000 years of corrosion had buried. For the first time, researchers could look straight through the rust and read the machine's own instructions. What that scanner found, once the data came together, would change how we understood ancient Greece. On the 30th of November, 2006, the team published their findings in the journal Nature. What they'd found was almost hard to believe. The mechanism didn't just track the sun and moon, it modeled the 19-year metonic cycle, matching the moon's phases to the solar calendar. It modeled the 76-year Callippic cycle, a refinement of the same idea. It modeled the Saros cycle, 18 years and 11 1/3 days, the rhythm by which eclipses repeat. And it modeled a 54-year cycle, the Exeligmos, correcting the Saros prediction to the right time of day. 2 spiral dials on the back did the real work, tracing these cycles the way a record needle traces a groove, winding decades of predictions onto one small dial instead of a plain circle. Bronze gears, cut by hand, more than 2,000 years ago, quietly doing the work of an eclipse calculator. Nothing this precise would be built again for well over 1,000 years. Since then, researchers, among them Alexander Jones at NYU and Paul Iverson at Case Western Reserve, have kept teasing more meaning from the inscriptions. Together, something like an instruction manual etched into the mechanism's own case. One dial tracks the 4-year cycle of the Great Pan-Hellenic Games, plus 2 smaller regional games, the Haliea of Rhodes and the Na of Dodona. A small detail, but exactly the kind that lets historians start asking where, in the ancient world, someone could have built this. For over a decade, the picture in researchers' minds mostly stayed still. Then, in 2021, a team asked a different question. What if we tried to build it back? In 2021, a UCL-led team, Tony Freeth as lead author, with Dr. Adam Wojcik, Professor Lindsay MacDonald, Dr. Myrto Georgakopoulou, and researchers David Higgin and Aris Dakanalis, published a new paper in Scientific Reports. Their goal was to solve how the mechanism's long-lost front display could ever have worked. The trouble was Venus and Saturn. Venus repeats its pattern roughly every 462 years. Saturn, roughly every 442. Somehow the ancient gear cutters fit both enormous cycles into a hand-sized case, and for years the team couldn't work out how. Then they found it. An old method associated with the philosopher Parmenides, built for exactly these kinds of ratios. Using it, they modeled gear trains that could, in theory, do the job. What they had, in the end, was a proposed working reconstruction of the mechanism's missing front face. A display showing the sun, the moon, and all 5 planets the Greeks could see with the naked eye, each on its own ring, moving in its own true rhythm, exactly the way the sky moves above your own head tonight. That's the machine we opened with. Somewhere in a Rhodian or Corinthian workshop, more than 2,000 years ago, somebody built a small bronze cosmos you could hold in 2 hands and set it turning. Stop and think about that for a moment. Nearly 2,000 years before anyone else on Earth managed anything close to this, in ancient Greece, someone already had. So who was it? Here's the strange part. After the X-rays, the CT scans, the reconstructions, we still don't have a name. No maker's mark, no signature, no workshop stamped into the bronze. Some researchers have wondered about Archimedes. Tony Freeth himself has said, cautiously, that Archimedes probably had the idea for this wonderful, complex, extraordinary system. The idea traces back to the Roman writer Cicero, who recorded that after Syracuse fell to Rome, the general Marcellus brought home 2 bronze spheres built by Archimedes, modeling the motions of the sun, moon, and 5 planets. One went into a temple. Marcellus kept the other. It's a lovely thread, but there's a problem with the dates. Archimedes died in 212 BCE, and most dating places the mechanism's construction decades, maybe a century, later. Historian Alexander Jones cautions against reading Cicero's account as evidence for this specific object. A beautiful story, it may simply not be this machine's. So if not Archimedes, then who? Several researchers on the project point instead toward Rhodes. The mechanism's lunar gearing matches a theory of the moon's motion developed by the astronomer Hipparchus, who worked on Rhodes. And that games dial names the Rhodian Haliea alongside the Pan-Hellenic Games. Rhodes was already known in antiquity as a center for exactly this kind of expertise. A strong clue, still only a clue. There's a third name, Posidonius, a Stoic philosopher who ran a school on Rhodes closer in time to the mechanism than Archimedes was. Cicero separately describes a similar globe connected to him. Nobody's proven it's the same device, but the timing fits better. And some scholars, including Mike Edmonds, suspect none of this fully answers the question, because a machine this refined is unlikely to have simply appeared from nowhere. It's more likely the one survivor of a longer Greek tradition of geared instruments we've simply never found evidence of anywhere else. If that's true, simpler ancestors of this very mechanism might still be waiting somewhere to be found. Even its purpose is debated. a working tool for astrologers and navigators, or a teaching model of the heavens for a wealthy owner who wanted to hold the cosmos in his hands? Perhaps in the end, a little of both. What we do know is that the sea hasn't finished giving this story back to us yet. As recently as 2022, archaeologists returned to that same wreck and recovered the long-missing bronze head of the Hercules statue found there over a century before. More than 120 years after those sponge divers first went down to shelter from a storm, that shipwreck is still handing up pieces of itself. What survives of the mechanism today is 82 fragments, the 7 largest holding the real machinery, with at least 30 bronze gears among them, the largest only about the size of your palm. All of it once sat inside a case roughly the size of a small mantel clock. It's preserved now at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, and it's widely considered the oldest known geared mechanism on Earth. Only around a third of the original device has ever been found. The rest is presumed lost, most likely still resting somewhere on that same quiet sea floor. So somewhere off a small Greek island, between the shipwrecks already found and whatever else is still down there in the dark, there may be more pieces of this story waiting. Who built it? Why nothing else quite like it survives? Those questions are still open, exactly the way the sea left them. If you'd like to keep wondering with us, there's a new mystery waiting here every week. Sleep well, and until next time, keep looking up.